You know, there's something quite peculiar about the way we perceive our minds. Have you ever noticed that in your constant quest for freedom, you might actually be reinforcing the very cage that imprisons you? It's as if we're fish swimming in an ocean, desperately searching for water, never realizing that what we seek is already the very medium in which we exist. The human mind operates within an extraordinary paradox. The more intensely we struggle to free ourselves from mental constraints, the more we reinforce their existence. Like a Chinese finger trap, where pulling harder only tightens its grip, our desperate attempts to escape our mental prisons often serve only to strengthen their walls. This invisible prison isn't built from steel or stone, but from something far more pervasive: our identification with thought itself. We've come to believe that we are our thinking, rather than recognizing that we are the awareness in which thoughts appear. This fundamental misidentification lies at the root of our psychological imprisonment. Eastern philosophies have long recognized this peculiar predicament. The Buddha pointed to it when he spoke of attachment and ignorance as the causes of suffering. The Tao Te Ching alludes to it in describing how the more you know, the less you understand. These aren't merely poetic expressions, but precise diagnoses of the human condition. The prison begins with a single, seemingly innocent assumption: that you are separate from the universe that created you. This sense of separation isn't something that happened to you. It's something you're actively doing, moment by moment, without realizing it. It's like continuously hitting yourself on the head and wondering why you have a headache. What would it be like to recognize that the very thing you're using to seek freedom, your thinking mind, might be the source of your captivity? What if freedom isn't found by acquiring something new, but by recognizing what was never actually missing? I wonder, have you ever had moments when this invisible prison temporarily dissolved? Perhaps in deep meditation, during an awe-inspiring sunset, or in a moment of complete absorption in music. What was your experience of self in those brief instants before your mind reclaimed its territory? I invite you to share these glimpses of freedom in the comments, as they're signposts pointing to what lies beyond our self-constructed limitations. In everyday life, we experience this prison most tangibly through our constant feeling of insufficiency. There's an underlying sense that something is missing, that we're not quite there yet, that we need something more to be complete. We might call this the when-then syndrome. When I get that job, then I'll be happy. When I find the right relationship, then I'll feel complete. When I achieve success, then I'll be enough. But have you noticed how this finish line keeps moving? Even when we attain what we thought would fulfill us, the sense of incompleteness mysteriously transfers itself to a new target. It's like trying to quench thirst by drinking salt water. Each achievement leaves us wanting more, often intensifying the very emptiness it was meant to fill. This treadmill of desire isn't some unfortunate circumstance. It's the natural consequence of a mind that misunderstands its own nature. We live in a culture that constantly reinforces this misunderstanding, encouraging us to find ourselves through acquisition, achievement, and endless self-improvement. Like hamsters on wheels, we exhaust ourselves without ever actually going anywhere. The trap operates through our habitual patterns of thought, which create the illusion of a separate self that needs protection and enhancement. Our minds are continuously spinning stories about who we are, what we need, and what's wrong with our current experience. These stories seem utterly convincing because we rarely step back to notice them as stories. Think of it like watching a movie. When you're fully absorbed in the film, you temporarily forget you're sitting in a theater watching light projected onto a screen. Similarly, we become so identified with our mental narratives that we forget we're the awareness witnessing these thoughts, not the thoughts themselves. This misidentification creates a strange phenomenon where we feel both imprisoned and yet unable to locate the prison walls. It's as if we're hypnotized, sleepwalking through life while believing ourselves to be awake. The Buddhist traditions call this fundamental ignorance avidya, not seeing things as they actually are. The paradoxes of our situation run even deeper. Our minds create elaborate problems and then exhaust themselves trying to solve them. We divide reality into opposites: good and bad, success and failure, pleasure and pain, and then find ourselves trapped between these artificial poles. We crave certainty in a universe whose very nature is change and uncertainty. It's rather like watching a dog chase its tail. There's an odd humor in observing such futile activity, but also a poignancy when we recognize we're doing essentially the same thing. The mind creates the very limitations it then struggles against, like a person who ties their own shoelaces together and then wonders why they can't walk properly. One of the most fascinating aspects of this invisible prison is how it transforms the entire universe into a reflection of our mental state. When we feel confined internally, the whole world appears as a series of limitations. Opportunities become threats, strangers become competitors, and even nature itself can seem indifferent or hostile to our existence. Consider how different the world appears when you're in a state of joy versus a state of depression. Is it the world that has changed, or the lens through which you're perceiving it? The prison walls project outward, coloring everything we experience. The mind's attempt to protect us from uncertainty creates a peculiar form of suffering. In trying to establish security, we cut ourselves off from the vibrant aliveness that comes with embracing the unknown. It's like trying to hold on to a beautiful butterfly by pinning it down. In our attempt to possess it, we destroy the very thing we admire. This brings us to a profound realization about the nature of our imprisonment. The walls of our mental jail are not made of our failures, but of our misguided successes. We've become extraordinarily effective at maintaining our limitations through habits of thought and perception that once served as protection, but now prevent our expansion. Beneath the surface of consciousness lies a vast ocean of being that isn't confined by our conceptual boundaries. Eastern traditions point to this as our true nature, variously called Buddha nature, true self, or simply awareness itself. This isn't something exotic or separate from your experience right now. It's the very space in which your reading of these words is happening. The void that underlies all forms isn't emptiness in the sense of nothingness, but rather the pregnant emptiness of infinite potential. Like the empty space in a cup that makes it useful, or the silence between musical notes that creates rhythm, this apparent nothingness is the ground of everything. When we begin to glimpse this dimension of our being, a curious vertigo often arises. The mind, accustomed to defining itself through boundaries and limitations, experiences a kind of existential freefall when those boundaries begin to dissolve. This disorientation is not something to avoid, but a necessary phase in the journey of awakening. The experience is rather like the moment in lucid dreaming when you realize you're dreaming. There's often a brief panic as the dream self recognizes it doesn't exist in the way it thought it did. Yet this recognition is the doorway to a much greater freedom. The freedom to consciously participate in the dream rather than being unconsciously controlled by it. This journey of awakening isn't something we accomplish alone. We're all exploring different facets of the same consciousness, each providing unique perspectives on our shared reality. In recognizing this interconnectedness, we find not only personal liberation, but also a deeper sense of community and purpose. This channel exists as a space for collective exploration of consciousness, where we can share insights and support each other in the sometimes disorienting process of awakening. By subscribing, you're not just following content, but joining a community of fellow travelers on this remarkable journey. In future videos, we'll continue exploring different dimensions of this awakening process, providing practical guidance for navigating the paradoxes and challenges that arise along the way. As we venture deeper into understanding the nature of our mental prison, we encounter a fascinating discovery. What we perceive as opposites are actually inseparable aspects of the same reality. Freedom and constraint, self and other, being and non-being. These apparent dualities exist in mutual dependence, like the two sides of a single coin. Consider how we cannot know light without darkness, pleasure without pain, or silence without sound. Each polarity defines and creates the other. When we try to grasp one side while rejecting its opposite, we fragment our experience and create internal conflict. It's like trying to buy a coin that has heads but no tails, a fundamental impossibility. The Eastern concept of yin and yang perfectly illustrates this interdependence. The white portion contains a dot of black, the black portion a dot of white, each flowing into the other in perpetual dance. This isn't merely a philosophical concept, but a direct description of how reality functions at every level of experience. Have you ever noticed how pursuing pleasure often leads to pain? How the things we desire most can become sources of suffering when we obtain them? How our greatest strengths can manifest as our most limiting weaknesses? These aren't unfortunate coincidences, but expressions of the unified field of opposites in which we live. The mind that recognizes this unity no longer needs to wage war against half of existence. What an extraordinary relief. Imagine no longer needing to eliminate uncertainty, prevent change, avoid discomfort, or maintain a flawless self-image. What freedom arises when we stop fighting against the basic nature of reality. This recognition brings us to a critical inflection point where consciousness begins to transcend duality. It's not that opposites disappear, but rather that we no longer experience them as conflicting or problematic. They become more like complementary colors in an artist's palette, each enhancing the other to create a richer whole. What happens when we begin to embody this understanding in our everyday lives? How might we live when we're no longer constrained by the invisible prison of conceptual thinking? Paradoxically, the awakened life doesn't look dramatically different from the outside. We still engage in work, relationships, and all the practical activities of human existence. The radical transformation is in how we relate to these activities, no longer as means to become complete, but as expressions of an already complete being. Ordinary activities take on extraordinary significance when performed with full presence. Washing dishes becomes a profound engagement with water, form, and sensation. Conversations transform into sacred exchanges of energy rather than transactions of information. Even challenging emotions become valuable messengers rather than unwelcome intruders. The awakened mind lives in the paradoxical space of being both form and emptiness simultaneously. It recognizes itself as a distinct expression of consciousness, form, while also knowing itself as the boundless awareness in which all forms arise, emptiness. This isn't a philosophical position but a direct lived experience, the experience that was always available but overlooked due to our fixation on thought. A transformed consciousness naturally expresses itself through certain qualities, a deep sense of sufficiency rather than lack, comfort with uncertainty rather than craving for control, compassion rather than judgment, spontaneity rather than rigidity, and a profound appreciation for the ordinary magic of existence. This transformation doesn't happen in one dramatic moment, but unfolds as a continuous process of recognition and integration. There are spectacular breakthroughs, certainly, but also subtle shifts that may pass almost unnoticed until we realize one day that we're responding to life from a fundamentally different place. As this process unfolds, we inevitably encounter internal resistance. The old patterns of thinking and identifying don't surrender without a struggle. The ego structure, having maintained control for so long, employs sophisticated strategies to preserve itself, often co-opting spiritual insights as new forms of identity. This resistance isn't a sign of failure, but a natural part of the awakening process. Like a detox reaction in the body, it indicates that deep changes are occurring. The key is neither to fight against this resistance nor to surrender to it, but to observe it with compassionate awareness, understanding its origins and purpose. The difficulty of this process is not a personal failing, but a reflection of how deeply conditioned our patterns of separation have become. Our culture, education, and most of our interpersonal dynamics continuously reinforce the illusion of a separate self. Swimming against this powerful current requires patience, courage, and tremendous compassion for ourselves and others. Yet this challenge also contains a hidden gift. The very tenacity of our conditioning gives us countless opportunities to practice awakening. Each moment of noticing our captivity becomes a doorway to freedom. Each experience of suffering becomes an invitation to deeper understanding. Nothing is wasted on the path. While each person's journey is uniquely their own, there are common elements we all share. The awakening of one consciousness is intimately connected with the awakening of all consciousness. Your insights and breakthroughs contribute to a collective evolution, just as you benefit from the awakenings of countless beings who have walked this path before you. The integration of seemingly opposite aspects of reality reveals a broader pattern. Everything we perceive as separate is actually connected in ways our conceptual mind cannot fully grasp. The boundaries between self and other, inside and outside, individual and collective, are not as solid or absolute as they appear. This interconnectedness isn't just a poetic metaphor, but the actual structure of reality, increasingly confirmed by both modern physics and contemplative traditions. We exist as distinct expressions of a unified field, like waves on the ocean, individually identifiable yet inseparable from the whole. A powerful metaphor for this relationship is that of the ocean and its waves. Each wave has its unique form, size, and movement, appearing to be separate from other waves. Yet every wave is made of the same ocean water, rises from the same depths, and returns to the same source. The wave's individuality is real, but its separation is an illusion. Similarly, your uniqueness as an individual is not denied in awakening, but is understood in a new context. You are both the particular expression, the wave, and the universal essence, the ocean, simultaneously. Your individual life becomes an extraordinary opportunity for the universe to experience itself from a perspective that has never existed before and will never exist again. This understanding transforms how we relate to our life challenges. The difficult relationships, health struggles, career setbacks, and existential questions that once seemed like obstacles to happiness reveal themselves as the very gateways to deeper awakening. Nothing needs to be different for liberation to be possible. The key is in how we relate to what is. As paradoxical as it may sound, true freedom comes not from transcending limitations, but from embracing them completely. When we fully accept the conditions of our human experience, including its uncertainty, vulnerability, and impermanence, we discover that these conditions themselves are expressions of the limitless consciousness we've been seeking. The Eastern traditions point to this with concepts like emptiness is form, form is emptiness, Buddhism, and the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao, Taoism. These aren't abstract philosophical statements, but precise descriptions of reality as it appears to the awakened mind. A reality where separation and unity coexist without contradiction. The greatest irony in our search for freedom is that what we're seeking has never been absent. Like a fish searching for water or a bird looking for air, we've been immersed in what we seek all along. Our very nature is the boundless awareness we've been striving to reach through our limited conceptual strategies. When this recognition dawns, there's often a mixture of laughter and tears, laughter at the cosmic joke of having searched so long for what was never lost, and tears for the unnecessary suffering created by our search. This bittersweet revelation marks the beginning of a profound homecoming to our original nature. The circle completes itself. What appeared at the beginning as an invisible prison is revealed to be the doorway to infinite freedom. The very mind that created the illusion of separation becomes the vehicle for recognizing unity. The journey that seemed to lead away from our starting point brings us back to where we always were, seeing it for the first time. In this return to our original nature, everything changes while nothing changes. The world remains exactly as it is, yet our relationship to it is transformed completely. The ordinary becomes sacred, limitations become opportunities, and even suffering becomes a pathway to greater compassion and understanding. The key that unlocks this invisible prison isn't found through accumulating more knowledge or achieving special states of consciousness. It's discovered in the simple act of being fully present with what is, without the filter of conceptual thinking. In that direct, unmediated experiencing, the prison walls are revealed to be projections of thought rather than aspects of reality. Perhaps the most beautiful discovery in this journey is that freedom isn't a distant goal to be attained through arduous effort, but the natural state that reveals itself when we stop trying to be anything other than what we already are. You are not trapped in an invisible prison. You are the boundless awareness in which all prisons and all freedom appear.